This game was requested by Cyberpunk Girl. It downloaded in 2 minutes, which was nice and quick, and it loaded fast too. It came on in a small window, but luckily in the options I could turn it to full screen. It started up with a jazzy background track and pixel art menu. I had a browse of the main screen, but there wasn't much on it other than muting the sound, exiting the game, and deciding if you want the game full screen or not. So I just decided to jump into it. The game then began to explain itself. It's a pixely art designed dungeon crawler, I guess, with turn-based combat. You try and wade your way through dungeons to earn coins, loot and rewards. These coins are used in the Soda Tavern, a place where you go to hire fighters to crawl the dungeon for you. The basic level fighters are just speedo wearing brutes and cost nothing to hire, but they of course have the lowest stats. There's always at least one of these for hire in the tavern, but their effectiveness can grow depending on the quality of weapons and armour you give them. As you increase the variety of patrons, you begin to access fighters with magical abilities, stronger natural stats, and some extra capabilities like being able to hold 2 items at once instead of 1, being able to perform group magic attacks, to steal loot from enemies, and to jump in and take attack damage in place of other players. The Soda Tavern contains the bartender, and when you speak to him you can upgrade various things. You can buy chairs for the tavern, which increase the chance of more people showing up, giving you more number and variety to hire. You can buy tables, which have the same effect. Soda kegs, which decrease the cost of hiring party members by 5% each time. An armory, which the salesman inhabits and increases the quality of weapons and armour you can buy. Beds, which, when you pay money, refresh your choice of bar patrons. You can buy a resident wizard who will zap you deeper into the dungeon to give you a better chance of getting to the end. You can improve decor, which gives you reputation points and brings higher level party members to your tavern. You can buy a kitchen, which gives you a 2% increase in health per each level, of which there are 10. Basically, if you max it out, you can get a 20% increase in health when diving into a dungeon. And finally, you can pay for a banker, who generates coins for you whilst you're away from the game, and he also has levels. The more you pay, the more he generates. You need certain types of soda in stock behind the bar to draw a better clientele, along with a good reputation. Then, the better fighters you get, the further you can get into the dungeon, and the more loot you can grab. It's pretty circular and self-sustaining in terms of a grind loot for upgrade mechanic. You pay coin to get good stuff, to bring better fighters to get you more coin to get good stuff. There can be a bit of luck involved in how far you get, since the patrons of the tavern are random, but the bed perk refreshes the tavern members to give you a better chance of a good choice, and it's usually fairly even. Dungeon crawler in this game means you only crawl one dungeon and the challenge is to crawl further than you did last time until you get to the big final boss. You have 10 stages per level of the dungeon, with a mid-level boss and an end-level boss in every one. At the end of levels you get a chest to open to give you bonus loot, and you can collect coins and item drops from enemies along the way. The jump in difficulty from level to level can be big, with boss enemies taking 3 HP off you per hit at the end of level 1, and then normal enemies taking 8 HP off you at the start of level 2. They also add in things like status effects such as poison and burn damage, which take health over multiple rounds, and that you need items, status effect resistance or healing to combat. The enemies start getting stupidly high health bars as well, and doing ridiculous base damage to you. They also gain area magic attacks when you start getting higher levels. The enemies sort of change, but it is effectively doing the same thing repeatedly. The game does have an auto attack button, so it can grind levels without you having to manually click to attack every time. The auto attack does take into account special abilities, item use, and magic attacks, so actually it's a bit more intuitive than I expected it to be. Although sometimes it fails to be predictive when it comes to healing, via a healing stone or via a player with actual healing abilities. A fair few times I had to jump back in and take control when a healing character took their turn. I think the way it works, from observation, appears to be that once a character's health drops below a certain percentage of its starting health, the need to heal will be identified. But if their health is low and outside that range, they won't be healed. The problem with that is that once all of your players have taken their turn, the enemy get free reign, and you have no idea who they choose to target. If you have a player on 30 health, and 5 enemies all capable of doing 14 damage per hit, you only need 3 of those to choose to attack them, and then you're toast. or 2 of them might get a crit and you'd still be in trouble. That's a chance that you often don't need to take, especially since strength in numbers is very important in this game, and the fighter may be carrying an important item. The healer players have a single heal and a group heal ability, but if 3 people get attacked and 1 person's health drops into the I need healing range, the auto-detect will just do a solo heal on that 1 person rather than doing all of them at once. Plus, if the game detects that your team is capable of killing a remaining enemy by all attacking, even though one of your players is on very low health, it won't prioritise healing ready for when you move on to the next level. It'll just throw you into the next one and hope that you don't get an ambush. Because if you do, that player is dead, gone, and you ain't getting them back. There is enemy variety in the dungeons, enough for the game to have its own monster list of creatures you've come across, given a name that I can only ever seem to read as bestiality when I look at it for some reason. Though the enemies do just become copy-pastes with environment-specific colour schemes at a point. I did feel to begin with the game had a lot of potential to be samey, especially with the dungeons being a very linear format, and even though you can jump to higher levels once you have the wizard, sometimes if you get only a few party members or lower skilled ones, it's not even worth going for the higher levels because you'll die after killing 2 enemies, and the amount of money you earn will give you minimum profit. The environments change every 2 levels, so you work from 1 to 10 in one level, 1 to 10 in another, and then you'll enter a new area, with new enemies that have new attacks. Oh, and the levels you pass in the dungeon are the levels of your account, but they're only valid in 10s, if that makes sense. For example, the bartender has a VIP purchase option section, but he says he can only show it to you at level 50. But that means you have to complete level 50 in the dungeon. There is no specific account level or tavern level or anything. To spice up the dungeon, they added other mechanics though, one being a fork in the road mechanic. This basically offers you an option of 2 doors, and a warning that you might get something very good, or very bad. You can choose to ignore these doors and carry on as normal, or you can pick one. If you take too long to choose, the game will carry on the normal path. But I got good experience of how good and bad these doors can be. This randomness of potentially getting a great gift of free healing for the whole team or getting free status effect damage for the whole team can make the game a little more exciting. The other mechanic is an ambush mechanic, where you can be sprung into a fight and the enemy get first dibs on attacking, meaning if you're low on health you can be easily wiped out, and it's guaranteed your team will take damage. It keeps you on your toes and forces you to think about how well vested you are to tackle a boss. Partway through, outside the tavern, there appears a gladiator arena, where you can take a team of 3 maximum and fight soldiers. The difficulty level can be increased, and if you do that, the reward for completing the 10 levels, in the same format as the dungeon, increases. You can only access harder difficulties, and thus greater rewards, by being a higher level in the main dungeon. Once you reach level 50, you unlock the VIP options, which contain sickeningly expensive but also very useful items like things that let you see enemy HP constantly, because that's not a thing normally. It can also buy you not so useful things like paying 5 million coins for the ability to customise your party members. The game does have pay-to-play elements, I should mention, but they're pretty easily avoided since the pay real money option usually sits next to the pay gold option in the shop menus. Now onto the items. You can equip one of these per player until you get special ones that can have 2, and these start off being simple things like a rock to throw at the enemy, and evolve into stuff like healing, the power of the healing depending on the character's stats and magical prowess, a fire rock that can deal group damage to enemies, a vial of blood that gives you immunity to status effect, and a rock that lets you see enemy health points. These can be used once during a fight and refresh at the start of the next stage you move on to. It's a bit of a juggling game with these because there are so many items and so little people and space to use them, so you have to think carefully about who to give what to. When you hire a player for your team, you have the option to auto-kit them out with your best gear, but be wary because this also includes items, and if you forget to check your configuration, you might end up with 5 fire rocks, which is all great for taking enemy HP down, but you'll have no healing when you desperately need it. As you can see, there's a lot going on in this game, more so than I would have expected from a game with such a short download time. It's very simple, and yet there are interlocking elements and planning required from pretty much all areas. In the tavern you have to make sure you buy a good team before you buy upgrades. Then you have to be sure those upgrades won't leave you so penniless that you have to jump into the dungeon from lower levels because you can't afford to skip to the higher ones. You have to make sure you have a good combination of items, and you have to make sure you're positioning fighters and holders of specific items in the best places. For example, when you have more than 3 players, 2 of them end up positioned behind the enemy, and these players can get increased percentage damage, so it might be worth putting a player with a high attack score in one of those slots to boost them even further. The art is pixel art, a little ragged, but the style is bright and vivid, well done, and it all meshes right with the enemies in the backgrounds. The animations are all good visuals involved, and the characters are well distinguishable. The music alters per different environment and is generally quite easy to drown out in important moments. In a weird way, it reminds me of both Dragon Quest IX, which was and probably still is my favourite game of all time on the Nintendo DS, and it also reminds me of God Awful Clicker, a game I reviewed on my channel previously and gave a dismal score to. The auto-battling and enemy grinding is what gives me the Clicker feel, since I ended up getting up and walking away from my PC on occasion and letting the game run itself. As I said before, I think it's valid to ask questions about a game that doesn't even need you there to play it, but with this game, the other vibes take that edge off. Dragon Quest IX was such a hit for me because you had to take care to plan, to use your abilities carefully and at the right time to tackle a boss successfully. And of course there was a luck element similar to this, in that critical hits for extra damage would come at opportune times on occasion and be cause for celebration. The fork in the road mechanic for this is that luck element as well, in a way, should you choose to use it. I do on occasion get those moments in this game where something lucky will come my way and I get the joy out of it, knowing I could break through into a new level set and see new enemies. Plus the door choosing and the choosing of chests at the end of levels, and the fact the heal mechanic is a little screwy, makes me want to sit by my laptop and watch events unfold, even if I'm not controlling most of it. It does lead me to be a little conflicted on how I feel about it though. It's got addictive qualities and is enjoyable, which does detract from the reality that you're fighting repeatedly in a straight line, dying over and over just to collect money so you can try and weasel yourself a chance to get further along that straight line and then start the process again. And what do you earn from it? Achievements, yes. Variety in players, yes. You get to find out what all the classes are like and what the enemies in the next area are like. So, yes, there are incentives to commit to the grind, even if you're not really needed to actually participate in all of that. I can't say though that the game would be better without the ability to auto-control. If you had to control the entire thing manually, it would be quite tedious. I do like that it's a very simple concept, it's just the whole baseline of the game and the way the mechanics work mean the game has to be run how it is, and I think the way they've done it is probably the best way it could have been done. It does draw you back in at the end of each run for you to pick a new team, equip them suitably and send them on their way, but after that you can sit back a bit. You can get into a weird rut though that is a little uncomfortable. I got to level 71 and spent ages attempting to pass it, until finally I worked up enough money to attract healers to my tavern, and that really changed the game. I developed a dream team that got me past level 80, and after that I got a real stroke of luck, opening one warp door to take me to the end of level 90, so I didn't even have to fight the boss, and then the next level I got another warp taking me to level 100, the final boss of the first part of the dungeon. It felt strange to spend so long on that, and the warps can be both a blessing and a curse. They can move you into the next 10-stage milestone, allowing you to start a bit further into the dungeon next time, but they may also thrust you unprepared into an area with powerful enemies. The level 100 boss fight was a big one. The boss had a lot of health but didn't attack too much, though I controlled it a lot more to make sure that the healers were doing right, and I managed to beat it. After that I went back to the tavern and spoke to the wizard, who opened up a portal and said it would take me to another dimension, where there would be a new dungeon. The game told me I would lose all my coins and equipment, presumably leaving me to start from square one just like I had at this place, having to earn equipment and coins from ground level again. I wasn't keen on that, so I went back into the same dungeon. You can carry on in the first dungeon through the hundreds of levels, but the dungeon resets to its original play areas and enemies, though all of them are boosted in health and damage. This allows you to earn the same loot as before, but at a higher level, and more money as well. I then ended up being poor and decided to try going through the portal, and it did what it said, stripped me down to the bare minimum and took all my money, so I was making teams of soda junkies again. However, all the perks I had in my tavern were still there, with my upgrades and the armourer. The armourer had only the lower class weapons available, so that does refresh from the start, but at least the bonuses you buy, like tables and stools, do stay. You lose all your sodas, so you have to unlock the higher skilled characters again, but it's not a complete restart. It also introduces the concept of relics, which are offered to you every time you jump dimensions. I was given a choice of 3 relics, one for a health boost, one for a strength boost, and one for a mana boost. I picked strength, and the way these relics work is that some creatures in the new dungeon, which is exactly the same as the old one but with different coloured sprites and slightly more powerful enemies, will glow purple, and when you kill them you get essence. You use the essence to level up your relic. The benefit the relic gives you, for example a +2 to your strength stat, is added on each time you level up the relic. So level 1 is +2, level 2 is +4, etc. This I think was a pretty good way of avoid having to feel like you've dredged yourself from nothing again, along with you being able to keep your perks. Also, the game gives you a free golden clock, which takes you up to a certain point and runs the game faster, so attacks are made quicker and fights are generally shorter. This encourages you to do more fights and make more progress in the dungeon quicker, again feeling like less of a troll than the first time. The only downside to this is that you come across a fork in the road, you can't choose a door because the game is going so fast and it doesn't wait for you. When it runs out, it offers for you to repurchase it permanently and goads you with tokens for essence, but you have to pay for it with real people money, so that was off the table. Another feature for Dimension 2 is the Lair of Despair. Again, another copy of the main dungeon, but this time with stars in the background and sprite redesigns, such as rabbits being Pikachus, and also stupidly powerful with big health bars again. This is just another dungeon of higher level for you to potentially get better loot from. Dimension 2's main dungeon was quicker to get to level 100 to find the boss, but the boss ran away to level 200, so I had to get there to fight them. This will happen in each new dimension. Dimension 2, the boss is at level 200, Dimension 3, it's at 300, until you get to Dimension 10 and you have to get to level 1000 to fight the boss, earning you the achievement. Sadly, once you leave a dimension, I can't see a way to get back, so basically all of your progress in the original dungeon is dead and gone. The game feels pretty endless in that sense, and it just goes to show that in terms of content span, you really have nothing to worry about with it running out of content to offer you. Yes, it's pretty much all a redesign of the exact same concept, which falls into a point of, if you don't like one part of it, you won't like any of it, because it's all exactly the same. You fight the same dungeon to get to a boss, then when you beat the boss, you open the dimension portal to jump into a new world to fight the same dungeon, to beat a further along boss, to open the dimension portal, and yeah, you get the gist. You upgrade, build loadouts, do side fights in the arena or whatever new dungeon iteration is generated for pseudo-variety. It doesn't feel as much of a drag as I thought it might getting to level 200. There's more loot and more money proportionally, so progress does take time but isn't dragged out. So, to save this review sounding like deja vu and lasting too long, though that would be apt for the format of the game, I'll wrap it all up. It's a good concept that's self-feeding, easy to understand and play, with endless content, good art, and backgrounds. There is planning involved, but not much skill, and the game can sometimes play itself without you, but given the choice of style for how the game is laid out, that's more of a pro than a con. It's addictive, but samey. The mechanics work alright 95% of the time, but the healing is a bit skew-if, and usually needs your input to work effectively, which kind of counters the autoplay option, but again, I'd rather have it than not. All in all, I do think it's pretty decent, so I will give Soda Dungeon an 8 out of 10.